The Apostle Paul is without doubt the most important theologian in Christian history. Yet rarely do we think about the physical conditions Paul had to operate under to bring the gospel to the ends of the earth. My name is Tim Foster, and in this series I'm leading a small group of Ridley students for a study trip of a lifetime.
Hang on!
We will be tracing Paul's missionary journeys, not just by land, but by sea. This is Following in the Wake of Paul.
Okay, so let's talk about the boat trip.
The boat trip. Dun, 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 dun. My expectations were, I think this will be a good trip. I've got no idea what to prepare for. I know the weather's going to be hot, but that's all. I just didn't know what it was going to feel like.
Originally, when I signed up, it was going to be the trip to Greece and we were going to do all that. We were going to stay on the land. And then Tim had this harebrained idea that we were all going to get on boats and we were going to sail. And I thought, man, I don't know.
I hadn't had any boating experience beforehand. It's not my comfort zone. I think I was relatively fortunate because nausea wasn't a big issue, but I know a number of people had that quite badly.
In my head was I had all the thought about all the Instagram pictures I could put up. But personally, I was really worried about it. I'm going to get seasick, and I was a little bit worried about it.
So I had really nervous expectations, but actually for the first 3 days especially, I was really good and I really enjoyed this. I thought, hey, I can see why people get into this.
Sometimes there are some experiences that you can only have by camping or by going on a boat, and I don't think we would have seen the same things had we been sort of going in and out each day.
And coming back and now being here a couple of months after having gone, it was amazing. It was really good, and I already encourage a lot of people to go there and to do that trip if they can.
In our final episode on Following in the Wake of Paul, we arrive at our last destination along the Aegean coast of Turkey, the port city of Andriake. Well, it's been pretty hard to get here to Andriake. We couldn't find somewhere to moor the boats. The water was too shallow. But we finally got here. We had to walk, find a track, find the way through here ourselves. And we're almost at what I think is going to be one of the most interesting and certainly biblically significant sites on our journey. In Acts 27, Luke gives a long and detailed account of Paul's captivity journey to Rome. One interesting detail is found in verses 5 to 6. It reads, "When we had sailed across the open sea off the coast of Cilicia and Pamphylia, we landed at Myra in Lycia. There the centurion found an Alexandrian ship sailing for Italy and put us on board." It is curious to read that Paul and the other prisoners were transferred onto another ship and no reason is given. Why change ships at all? And why here at Andriake? I've brought the students to the ancient site of Andriake, which was the actual port referenced in Acts 27 verse 6. Here, a modern museum is built inside a recently restored Roman grain store from the 1st century. The museum houses a vast collection of ancient artefacts which give us a deep insight into maritime life and the significance of grain in the Roman Empire.
So along the coast, along the southern Turkish coast, every city sort of would have had their main industry that they contributed to society and trade. So for Andriake, it was grain. They had a big granary there. Andriake was the port city of Myra, and so it was a really pivotal port city for the whole Roman Empire who needed grain. People needed that more and more, and it just seemed natural that Paul would swap ships there. Lots of ships were going all the different directions and using that as a common port. So it would have been busy back in its day.
Andriake would have provided some welcome respite for Paul from his sea travel. As the replica coastal ship which we find outside the museum indicates, Paul faced some very difficult living conditions during the 1,000 or more miles he did sailing these waters. So we're standing on a replica coastal vessel. It's not the kind of ship that Paul sailed on from here, but it's the kind of ship that he would have sailed on to here, because remember, that was a coastal vessel. How do we know? Well, if you read the account in Acts 27, it talks about there's over 200 hands on the ship. Right, 200 people, souls will not be lost. You can't imagine 200 people on this ship, right? So we know that the ship he was on was significantly bigger. They've got a lot of evidence for the size of boats from the 1st century because of all the shipwrecks that are along this coastline. And a grain ship was about 100 feet long. So it still would have been cramped. It would have had almost no cabins. People, because they want to use that valuable space for cargo, they would sleep up here on the decks. Certainly in a coastal vessel, you'd be sleeping up here on the decks. There's no toilet. Instead, you'd be doing your stuff off the back. Often they'd have something you could kind of sit on it like a swing, and you'd be hanging out the back there. And of course, there's no motor. If you're a passenger, there's no food. You've got a BYO. And this sort of vessel would not spend the nights at sea typically. They would try to go in. But as we know, sometimes you get becalmed, you're stuck out there. Sometimes the next available port is 2 days sail away, and you've just got to do it. A bit like I think Paul did coming from Rhodes up to here.
It kind of makes you think, well, what sort of a person, like what sort of a character was Paul, like that he persisted in that journey. He either was a bit crazy or just completely convicted by the gospel. I think it sort of emphasised clearly the Holy Spirit was propelling behind that.
In understanding shipping, you're understanding the kind of journey that Paul had to go on, and it makes you realise what an arduous and what a long journey Paul had to face to do his missionary work in the, seas that we've been in as well. So I think that's really given me some insight into how hard it must have been for him to spread the gospel.
You don't get a comfortable bed. You don't get to change your clothes every day. You might be sleeping outside. You don't have nice toilets or toilet paper. I think we read, and then he got on the ship and sailed somewhere, and we're like, oh, that's nice. That would have been a nice trip for him. And so when we read that and what his reality was, are two totally different things.
Speaking about nice toilets and reality, while following in the wake of Paul, Ridley student David Horn got into a very embarrassing and smelly situation.
Hey, so I just came out of the toilet and it's not flushing and I think it was before and now it's not. I went onto this yacht. It looked like it's been built in the last 10 years or something. It looked relatively modern.
Right, so this is our boat. This is Dave. He's trying to keep cool. This is where Tim's going to be, as his little room, which is actually quite a lot of room. This is the boys' toilet with a little shower. So that's what they've got to use.
And yet somewhere in there they decided to use pipes in the toilet that are this big. And they say you're only allowed to use 3 sheets of toilet paper and then you've got to flush it. Come on, it's not the 1800s. I can use more than 3 sheets of toilet paper. And went to flush and just no deal. Toilet said no, and it was blocked.
Alright, I just... There was a misunderstanding. I don't think it was communicated clearly enough.
The pumps on the toilets were stuck or not sucking. I don't really know. All I know is that I woke up to the most horrendous smell, opened the toilet door, and there was brown water all over the floor. And there's only one thing that can have caused that, and it was just not a good sign.
And there is not much worse that can happen than having excrement floating in a bathroom that everyone has to use.
We have a bucket for water that you can just tip down to kind of use the hose. Flush.
No, because the problem is
it's now risen to
the pushing handle
Noah heights.
only goes down about 50% of the way.
you got
to push the lever across.
Lever across.
So it means the lever's not
I've
across
tried
enough.
many times.
No,
That way,
go harder.
That way.
Well, I'm not going in there to fix it.
No. Oh my gosh. When he opens the door though, it's a bit wafty. Come on, Dave.
Yeah, that wasn't cool. There's nothing good about that.
And so we really did step into the footsteps of Paul at that time, and had to think, how would Paul have gone to the toilet? You know, if he didn't have flushing toilets, what would he have done?
Sure, our yacht was a little bit more luxurious than what he went on, but it got us one step closer to understanding what he went through. I think it was good that the toilet broke. What you get to see in those situations is how you do literally deal with the bog, how you deal with the sweat, how you deal with all those raw things of life, which means that those facades come down so quickly and you get to know that real person underneath. And I think laughing together about it, commiserating each other through it, getting through the sweat and the grossness together bonds you together on a new level. And I do wish that happened a bit more in church. I think we can keep it too nice.
And so we come to the end of our journey as we follow Paul in his footsteps and in his wake. We're leaving the port city of Andriake as he did on his captivity journey, in chains on his way to Rome. Along the way we've experienced what Paul experienced. He did it for nearly 1,500 miles of his 3,000 miles of missionary journeys. We've just done it for a couple of 100 miles. But it's been a great journey. We've learnt a lot, and it's been a great joy to follow some miles, not just in Paul's footsteps, but in his wake.
Yeah,
How are you doing, Clive?
good. Yeah, doing well.
Enjoying yourself?
I love it. This is fantastic.
What do you say to people who think going on a holiday, swimming, while reading the Bible is all just nonsense?
Well, it's not nonsense. It's knowledge is never too heavy a burden to carry. If you go places and then think, yeah, I want to learn something from this, then you will get a lot out of it.
Every insight that we get into the culture, what was going on, the landscape, helps put our imagination into that place. Imagination is actually a useful tool in exegesis. I think sometimes we neglect that. We need to be able to put ourselves into that position. And so, no, I think that sailing and seeing the coastline, seeing the terrain, I think we can draw theology from that kind of experience and help it to inform our reading of Scripture.
I think when in the West, though, we grow up reading so much about the Bible, and all these places, we have faith that they're true, but they're really only names of places on a piece of paper. And actually to go there and to be able to go, hang on, this is that place over there, it's just a surreal experience. It was unreal.